So I've already banged on about the regular Vivo V29 and now it's Pro time, baby. The Vivo V29 Pro boasts even beefier performance and even more spooge-worthy camera tech, including a portrait lens with 2x zoom. So let's whip the Vivo V29 Pro out the box, test out the gaming chops, the camera tech, all that good stuff. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Well, thank you very much. This is really incredibly tight on So what do you get in the box besides a slightly dinged up Vivo V29 Pro? Well, you got yourself a proper big old chunky Vivo flash charge adapter, Type-C USB cable, pokey SIM pin, and oh yes kiddies, Vivo has kindly bundled a condom case to wrap around your V29 Pro and keep it protected. And that right there is everything you'll find inside of the box. So the Vivo V29 Pro sports very similar design to the original regular Vivo V29, that highly fashionable curvy design that a lot of mid-rangers sport these days. It's proper skinny with a slopey screen. As you can see, there just curves off at the left and right edges, so you've got next to no bezel action there. It's just under 7.5 centimeters thick and weighs just 188 grams. It is sadly just plastic edging on the Vivo V29 Pro, which does detract from the otherwise luxurious hand feel. And around the arse end, as you can see there, the Pro version is pretty much identical to the regular V29. But sadly, it's not available in the same trippy selection of bright and bold colours. We're literally talking black and blue. You've got Vivo's snazzy 3D particle finish, which makes it all disco ball glittery. It's got a slightly textured, almost paper-like surfacing, really feels lovely. The original Vivo V29 was IP68 water and dust resistant. There's no IP rating here on the Vivo V29 Pro though, even though it's essentially the same design as far as I can tell. I do wonder if it's just Vivo saving a few bucks by not getting it IP rated. I haven't actually tested this by dunking it in water yet because I've had to shoot this video, and if it's just gurgling water and not turning on, then that's not much use. But it has survived a bit of gentle UK weather so far, so hopefully all good. Now the Vivo V29 Pro comes with Android version 13 stuffed on it, and slathered on top of that you'll find the never not amusingly titled FunTouch OS, again version 13. Apparently for the V29 Pro, Vivo is promising 3 years of security updates and 2 Android OS updates, which isn't too bad for a mid-ranger, although you will find stronger commitments from the likes of OnePlus and Samsung. But you should get Android 14 on this bad boy, hopefully without too much of a wait, and then Android 15 beyond that. And FunTouch thankfully doesn't meddle too much with that winning Android formula, so you've got your apps drawer, you can drag down that notification center from anywhere, you've got the Google Discover feed, etc. However, you do also get a fair amount of crapware packed on these things, the likes of Facebook, LinkedIn, all the usual offenders. Good old Snapchat. Do people still Snapchat? But thankfully, the majority of this can be swiftly removed from said device. And I've got to admit, I do get a certain satisfaction from telling the likes of LinkedIn to piss right off. And you've got a respectable amount of customization on here. The likes of an always-on display, of course. You chuck that on, got quite a variety of styles to choose from. You can even add in your own personal greeting. And you can customize pretty much any of the animations and effects on the Vivo V29 Pro, right down to the likes of the fingerprint sensor animation. Even the USB insertion animation. And speaking of that fingerprint sensor, it's the usual in-display optical effort here on the V29 Pro. Seems perfectly responsive and everything. No idea what's going on here, like all of a sudden the screen protector has started bubbling up over here on the left edge. That's not great, that's probably going to have to come off because that is pretty ugly. Or as an alternative to the fingerprint sensor, you do of course have the usual face unlock, which isn't quite as secure, but as you can see they're just as nippy. And Vivo has rather generously stuffed 256 gigs of storage on the V29 Pro. That's double what you get on many flagship phones that cost twice as much, the likes of the iPhone 15 Pro. No space, however, in that SIM tray for a micro SD memory card, just 2 SIMs. Now, as well as the same design as the regular Vivo V29, the Pro also rocks the same 6.78-inch AMOLED display. As well as being a bit slanty at the edges, this panel boasts a super crisp 1.5K resolution, delivering 452 pixels per inch. So those visuals are supremely sharp. You got HDR10+ streaming support, strong contrast, poppy colors, and it's nice and bright as well, topping off at 1300 nits. So no worries if you live somewhere that does occasionally get a bit sunny. You'll still be able to see all of that action. A tiny wee selfie cam orifice squirreled away up towards the top end of the display. You barely even notice it when you go full screen. Nice wide viewing angles, and thankfully I didn't have many issues with screen responsiveness when I was clutching the phone tight despite my fingers and palm flesh intruding on that display. You've got some color presets you can mess around with if you want to change up the general vibe of those visuals. You can also manually tweak the color temperature. And the V29 Pro's display maxes out at 120 Hz. You can stick it on that full time, otherwise it can automatically swap between 60 and 120 based on what you're up to. Sadly, however, just a mono speaker setup on the V29 Pro, just that bottom firing speaker. The top speaker does sod all. Let's check it out.
So the question is, if you really want to escape actual reality that badly, do you go for the MetaQuest 3 VR headset? Or do you instead spend that cash on 24 bottles of Dead Man's Fingers?
So reasonably loud on the top volume and not too tinny either, but it is a real shame it's a basic mono speaker setup here when many mid-range rivals boast a stereo output instead. Now the original Vivo V29 was powered by the dependable but slightly old and creaky Snapdragon 778G, whereas that's been ripped out here for the Pro model and replaced with Mediatek's Dimensity 8200. And I found that everyday performance certainly holds up very well indeed. The Dimensity 8200 is pretty good at some light multitasking, and certainly flipping around that FunTouch UI is a buttery, oily, creamy, smooth experience. And the V29 Pro ain't too bad when it comes to gaming either. The likes of Genshin Impact, you can play it on the highest detail settings, although it is quite a juddery experience. I would certainly knock it down to more medium levels if you want a more fluid frame rate. And screen responsiveness can be a wee bit balky at times. Sometimes my character decided to do a flip or just stand there instead of twatting a monster like I wanted him to. So I'd certainly say if you're a serious gamer, maybe look elsewhere. But you've got various cooling layers here which do help to keep the Vivo V29 Pro from getting too toasty. It does start to warm up a bit after about 30 minutes of Genshin-ing. And you got those dedicated FunTouch gaming tools stuffed on there as well. All the usual stuff like Do Not Disturbs, you can record the action, etc. And despite the fact the Vivo V29 Pro is a skinny wee beastie, Vivo has still managed to stuff a 4600 mAh capacity battery inside that slender chassis. And this certainly seems to do the job for all day play. You managed to run sort of 5 to 6 hours of screen on time with quite extensive camera use and all kinds of other shenanigans. Well, the good news is if you do find yourself running low, you need to give it a quick top up where you got that 80 watt flash charge support just like on the original Vivo V29. So bung a cable in it for 15-20 minutes, you'll have more than enough power to see you through a full afternoon or evening. So let's finish up this Vivo V29 Pro unboxing and hands-on review with a squint at the camera tech. And while the regular V29 used a quad-beer primary sensor, what you've got here is that 50 meg IMX766 from Sony with a good bit of OIS. That camera app is basically the same though, no surprises here at all. Got lots of different camera modes you can play around with, the likes of a portrait mode, a night mode. You've also got yourself a high-res mode if you want to shoot at that full 50 megapixel resolution, and the dedicated Pro mode. And this comes packed in all the tools you'd expect. You can mess around with the white balance, the shutter speed, the ISO levels, etc. And you can also shoot in RAW. However, in the 72-ish hours I spent with the Vivo V29 Pro, I did shoot all of these test shots just using the regular auto mode like the majority of users would do. And I was generally happy with the results that I got here. Really bright poppy colors, sometimes boosted quite a bit, so don't expect natural looking results. And I did see some funny results of post-processing, like this weirdness going on around the oar here. But overall, you can expect crisp pics packed with fine detail, and in more ambient conditions, again, the Vivo V29 Pro holds up well, as long as there isn't too much motion. At nighttime, it does try to overcompensate by brightening things up a bit too much, but again, it'll do the job. And the Vivo V29 Pro also boasts a portrait shooter with 2x optical zoom using Sony's IMX663 sensor. This just allows you to get a bit closer to your subject and get that lovely bokeh style background action as well. Works really, really well. Great stuff if you want to be shooting kids, pets, etc. And you can also use that zoom to get a bit closer to the action if you're shooting something from afar. Don't expect fantastic results when you start to crop in past the 2x zoom level, but it's not bad at all compared with most mid-rangers. And of course, just like the original Vivo V29, you've got Vivo's Aura Flash on here. This is an incredibly bright rear ring, which reminds me of me after a really spicy vindaloo. As you can see there, you can tweak the color temperature from cold to warm. And this can be used in different lighting conditions to get a different skin tone effect, or just straight up blind your subject. Always fun. And then if you're a fan of the old home movies where you can shoot video at up to 4K resolution at either 30 or 60 frames per second, you can shoot perfectly respectable looking 4K video. Not as good as what you'd get from the likes of a Samsung, but reasonably crisp. The audio pickup's okay as long as it's not too blustery, but the stabilization's not fantastic, so you won't want to move around too much as you're shooting. And then last up, as before, you've got a 50 meg selfie cam with autofocus around front. Works pretty well as long as those lighting conditions aren't too adverse. And you can once again record 4K footage using that front-facing selfie cam. It's quite good for your zooming, your Skyping, etc. because the audio pickup is rather good. Pleasingly crisp, or not so pleasing if you've got saggy, baggy features like these. And there you have it, my lovelies. That in a delicious wee nutshell is the fresh new Vivo V29 Pro. As you can see, it changes things up a wee bit compared with the regular V29s. You've got different chipset running the show, a bit of Mediatek action. You've also got upgraded camera tech, particularly good for those portrait snaps if you're well into that. Otherwise the same, respectable battery life. You've got that pretty slick looking design, just not quite as many bright and in-your-face color options. That's what I reckon of the Vivo V29 Pro. It'd be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do poke, subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest techie things. And have yourselves a bloody wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone. Love you.